Time now for a popular weekly cookery segment, Northern Nancy's Country Kitchen, with this week's recipe, strawberry and apple pie. Okay, welcome to another episode of Northern Nancy's Country Kitchen. Good morning, Nancy. How are you today?
Good morning.
And what are you going to make for us today?
I'm making pastry, which is going to be turned into pies.
Pastry which is going to be turned into pies, yes. Now, is that different from pastry that's going to be turned into jam tarts, or is this sort of like your basic pastry recipe?
Just all the same.
All the same.
Right.
Okay.
First of all, I'm greasing my tins.
You're greasing your tins.
I'm greasing my tins. This is going to be the big pie. That's the strawberry and apple pie. And these are going to be two little apple pies. I'm using the metal dish because it browns more easily. I'm not filling these until later on in the day, so I shall put a piece of pastry on top of that. So I'm greasing that as well to put the pastry on.
And that's a plate, is it?
That's a plate. It fits on top of this tin.
So you're making a pastry top and a pastry base, is that right?
That's right. Now I'm going to weigh out my ingredients. In there I have got 4 ounces of the dreaded pig fat known as lard.
Yes, lard is a well-known ingredient in pastry in the north of England, looked on by horror with many in other parts of the world, particularly those who don't eat pig. So if you're someone who doesn't eat animal fat, what can you substitute as an alternative?
Do you consider butter an animal fat?
Well, not in the same way that lard is, because the animal doesn't have to be killed to produce butter.
That's the lard, and this is an equal quantity of vegetable fat. In this case I'm using Trex.
And what quantities of fat are you using here?
This is 4 ounces each of fat. The proportions are twice the fat to the amount of flour. So I've got half a pound of fat. I'm going to put in a pound of flour.
So 4 ounces of Trex, which is vegetable fat, 4 ounces of lard, which can be substituted with butter,
yes,
and 8 ounces of flour.
No, 1 pound of flour.
Oh, I'm sorry, 1 pound of flour, because it's double the quantity.
Double the quantity.
Now, why would you use two different types of fat for your pastry?
It's what I've always been used to, what my mother used to do.
So it's a traditional recipe, in other words.
Recipe, yes.
Yeah.
I'm taking off my rings because I'm going to rub through the pastry into the fat. Here we go. 2 hands. I brought it up to room temperature so that it's easier to combine.
I have heard that it's good to use butter or fat straight from the fridge when making pastry, and you're saying you use yours at room temperature.
If you want to use it straight from the fridge, you have to grate it on a coarse grater.
So that it mixes in more easily.
Yes. Yes.
Now, when I have tried to make pastry myself, it's inevitably ended up being rather dry and tasteless. So what are your tips for this stage of rubbing in the pastry, Nancy?
I haven't got any tips at all. This is, as far as I'm concerned, this is just what I do normally. There's nothing special about this, but they always say that you need cool hands, but it doesn't seem to matter to me. And although I say it myself, my husband likes my pastry. When I was learning to cook, I was told to do this while I was sitting down. That would save time.
Or save energy, maybe.
Save energy and give you a rest, yes. I usually do this to the company end of Classic FM.
Okay, so maybe that's what the secret of your pastry is. It's got a bit of Beethoven in with the... Now, do you put any salt in with your pastry or baking powder or anything like that? So it's just flour.
And I'm lifting it up like this, and so it gets a little bit extra air in. There we are. Give the dish a bang, and the lumps will come up to the top. There we are, nearly done. There we go. I'm going to add the water now. I can't tell you how much water to use because it depends on how the flour's working today.
Well, we'll try and measure approximately what you use so that our listeners have a starting point. I think this is...
In here I have got half a pint of water, so I'm just going to put in a drop at a time, not too much.
And this is cold water, not hot water. I seem to remember in the recipes that always says freshly drawn cold water. I'm not sure what the alternative to that is. I suppose bottled water is...
Yes, could be.
So how much again do you have in that jug?
I had a half a pint in.
Half a pint.
Yeah. Yes. I'm using my hands now because I can get a better feel of the pastry.
So you're using self-raising flour in this recipe, Nancy?
Yes.
But you've said that some people use plain flour.
Indeed, yes.
Is there any difference between using either of those?
Not to me there isn't, but some people can tell that the self-raising flour rises a bit more than the plain flour.
Okay, and this is how the pastry should look when it's actually...
Clean bowl.
Yes.
And there we are.
Okay.
At this stage, some people put it in the fridge. I'm going to roll out mine before I put it in the fridge, which saves the time, because if you put it in the fridge now, you've got to bring it to room temperature to roll it out.
So just to recap, you started off with potentially 10 ounces of water, which is half a pint.
Yes.
But you actually only used, in this particular case, about 6 to 7 ounces of water.
Less than that. 5 to 6.
5 to 6. So you actually only used just over a quarter of a pint.
That's right.
Which was about 150 millilitres.
But you have to add it gradually because you're never quite sure how the flour is going to work.
Okay, so what are you doing now?
I've divided it up. I'm going to roll out a piece. This is going to be the top bit. This is the bit I'm going to put on this plate, which is going to be the lid of the pie.
Now, what are your tips for rolling? I notice you've put some...
Flour the table.
Flour the table, that's to stop the pastry from sticking.
Flour the pin.
Flour the rolling pin.
Flour the rolling pin.
And you're starting from towards you and rolling backwards and forwards fairly quickly and then turning the pastry through a quarter turn.
I'm trying to get a circle.
Right. I remember when I used to make pastry, I could never manage to do that. It used to take me about 10 minutes to get a circle of pastry. You've just made a few rolls.
Yes, it's fairly rough because... yeah.
And that's going to be the top of the pie.
It's going to be the top of the pie. Just straighten it up. This is the base.
So it's about half and half.
No, a third and 2/3.
So a third for the base? Or 2/3 for the base?
2/3 for the base. I'm trying to get another circle. It's a fairly deep dish this, and it's metal. But if you haven't got metal, if you'll find it doesn't brown as much at the bottom.
That's interesting. So if you use a ceramic dish, that's why you often get that really anemic looking pastry.
Right.
And a metal dish, because it holds the heat better, produces a more crisper looking pie.
Yes. There we go. Now we're going to put it on the dish over the edge of the rolling pin.
Now what do you do if the pastry sticks to the table like it used to do whenever I made pastry? Is that because there's not enough flour in?
I don't know why it does.
Yeah, your pastry seems to stick together. Perhaps it's the different fat quantities. I must try that. We were also told different quantities at school to put less fat to flour, so maybe the extra fat, I think we were taught to put 3 parts fat to 8 parts flour, and you've put 4 parts fat to 8 parts flour, 1 to 2, which is not any easier to remember. It seems to make better pastry.
So get a little bit of pastry like that, roll it into a ball and go around there pressing it down.
That's a good tip, so you don't have to handle the pastry as much.
Right, now you can see it's not quite level there, so I'm going to patch it up because that won't show. There we are. There we are. Now that's the pastry. I'm putting that on there, and that's going to go in the fridge to be cooked.
So we'll leave Nancy now making her little pies, and she'll be able to put Classic FM on now instead of having me directing her. Thank you, Nancy.